"It's just a hunk of scrap metal," she told me, while my own son just stared at the empty oil stain on the floor. They thought they had only sold a car, but they didn't know about the weapon my husband left hidden inside. They were about to learn that a grieving widow is the most dangerous woman alive. The garage was cold. That dark oil stain on the concrete was the only proof my husband was ever here. Sunlight cut through the dust, hitting the empty space where 20 years of his life used to gleam. Sophia checked her phone. Liam shifted his weight. My son wouldn't look at me. For 40 years, Arthur and I built a life in this house, and my son let a stranger erase the best part of it. Just like that. His silence was the only sound in the entire world. My son sold his father's legacy. He didn't even look at me. My son's silence followed me out of the garage. It was heavier than the California coastal fog that rolled in each morning. It settled in the quiet corners of the house, a ghost of the life we used to have. The emptiness in the garage was a wound, and that silence, that was the salt. My mind drifted back in time, to that same garage, but it was full of life then. A gleaming, half-restored, cherry-red Mustang sat proudly. A teenage Liam, maybe 16, was in the driver's seat. Arthur, my Arthur, his face smudged with grease, leaned in through the open window, patient and smiling. I could almost hear his warm, chuckling voice again. "Easy on the clutch, son." "Don't fight it. Just feel where it wants to go." Liam's foot would slip and the car would lurch and stall with a loud clunk. I remember him groaning in frustration. "I can't get it, Dad." And Arthur would just smile that patient smile of his. "You got it. Breathe. Start her up. Try again." From the doorway connecting the garage to the house, I'd watch them, holding 2 bottles of cold soda, my heart full. That car wasn't just metal to Arthur. It was a language. It was how he taught our son about patience, about respecting the things you build with your own 2 hands. It was how he showed his love without needing the words. A turn of a wrench, a shared look over a roaring engine. That was their conversation, a language I understood perfectly from the sidelines. The memory faded, and the sound of the roaring engine dissolved back into the oppressive silence of the present. I was in the kitchen. It was bright and clean. I sat at the table, my hands wrapped around a coffee mug I hadn't touched. Liam and Sophia were there. Sophia bustled about, pulling a box of expensive Italian pastries from her designer bag. "I brought croissants, Helen," she chirped, "from that little French place downtown. Liam says they're your favorite. We have to celebrate." Celebrate. The word felt like broken glass in my mouth. Sophia placed a pastry on a plate in front of me. Her nails were perfect, blood red. She squeezed Liam's shoulder, a gesture that seemed loving to him, but possessive to me. "Liam works so hard," she continued. 40 hours a week, all that stress. He deserves this trip to Italy. He deserves to see the world, to make new memories, don't you think? She spoke about my son as if she had invented him, as if his entire history began the day he met her. She had a way of framing every selfish desire as a gift to him. She was a brilliant artist, and my son was her canvas. Liam nodded along, his eyes still avoiding mine. "She's right, Mom. It's for the best. We can finally do things. Go places." His words were his own. The voice was his. But the script was written by her. I could see the strings. Why couldn't he? I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was cold. I set the mug down with a soft click. "The car was for your future," I said, my voice steady. "Your father always said so." Sophia's smile tightened for just a fraction of a second before becoming bright again. It was a flawless performance. "Oh, of course. And we're so grateful. But this is for his future, Helen. Building a life together." She waved a dismissive hand. "That old car was... well, it was tying up assets, wasn't it? All that money just sitting in a garage. It's much more useful now. Assets. That's what Arthur's soul had become. A line item on her balance sheet. I just watched her. I listened. I filed it all away. Arthur was a man of details. Every piece of that Mustang had a purpose. Every wire, every screw. He taught me to see the small things, the things people try to hide. My mind flickered to another memory, sharper this time. It was just a few months before he passed. Arthur was in the garage, hunched over the dashboard of the finished Mustang, a small screwdriver in his hand. I had asked him, "What are you doing now, honey?" I thought she was finished. He didn't look up from his work. "Almost," he'd said. "Just one more thing." He had carefully removed the old classic clock from the dashboard. I remember asking him, "What's wrong with the old clock?" It worked fine. He held up a new but identical-looking clock. "This new one is special, Helen," he told me, his voice serious. "It keeps perfect time." He was so focused that day, so determined, an urgency I didn't understand back then, but I was beginning to understand now. He saw things I didn't. He always saw everything coming. Back in the kitchen, Sophia was now scrolling on her phone, showing Liam pictures of hotels in Rome. He was smiling, leaning into her, the garage and his father's memory completely forgotten. She thought she was in control. She thought the game was over. But a game has rules, and she had no idea who wrote them. I remembered Arthur, on his knees, insisting on installing that new dashboard clock himself. Strange. That single strange thought about the clock lingered long after they left the kitchen. It was a tiny splinter of ice in the warmth of my memories, a warning I couldn't yet decipher. The next week passed in a blur of forced pleasantries. Liam and Sophia were staying in the guest room, their laughter echoing in the hallways, a constant reminder of the gaping hole in the garage. They were packing for their trip, filling the house with expensive new luggage and the scent of Italian leather. I watched them. I waited. And on their last night here, I decided I couldn't let them leave without one last attempt to reach my son. We were in the living room. A cold evening wind rattled the windows. Liam was scrolling through his phone, and Sophia was filing her perfect blood-red nails. The silence was a battlefield. I broke it first. "Who did you sell it to, Liam?" My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. Sophia stopped filing. She looked up, her smile as bright and hard as a diamond. "Oh, just a collector, Helen." A very enthusiastic one. "Don't you worry your head about the details. We got a very fair price." I kept my eyes on my son. "It had a name. Your father called her Cherry. I would like to know who owns her now." Sophia let out a little laugh, a sound like chipping ice. And then came the words that changed everything. "Honestly, Helen, it was just a hunk of scrap metal." "Arthur is gone." The air left my lungs. The phrase hung there, obscene and glittering with cruelty. I turned to Liam, my last hope, begging him with my eyes to defend his father, to defend our memory, to say something, anything. He just stared at the floor. He cleared his throat. He adjusted his cuff. He did not speak. The silence in that room became a physical thing. It was heavier than furniture, thicker than air. It was the sound of a 40-year bond snapping in two. In that moment, watching my son refuse to meet my gaze, I understood. It wasn't just a car they had taken from me. They were taking my whole life, piece by piece. They were erasing me. They left soon after. I didn't get up to say goodbye. I just sat there as the front door closed, the sound echoing through the now empty house. The sun had set, and the room grew cold. I was a ghost in my own home, surrounded by memories that no longer felt like mine. Was this it? Was this how my story ended? A quiet, lonely fade into nothing? Number. Something inside me broke, or maybe it finally forged itself into something hard, something unyielding. Grief is a choice. I chose anger. They left a widow. They would find a fighter. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. I walked past the guest room on my way to get a glass of water. A thin sliver of light escaped from under the door. I could hear Sophia's hushed, excited whispers. Curiosity, cold and sharp, pulled me closer. The door was slightly ajar. I peered through the crack. Liam was asleep on the bed. Sophia was sitting up, the glow of her laptop illuminating her face. She was focused, intense. And on the screen, I saw the words she was typing into the search bar. How to sell a house owned by a senior with dementia. I backed away from the door, my hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. The words on her screen burned behind my eyes, a declaration of war I never wanted. Dementia. She wasn't just planning to take my house. She was planning to erase my mind, my credibility, my very existence. I stumbled back to my room, the house silent again, but now it was a predatory silence. I didn't sleep. How could I? I sat in the dark, watching the shadows grow long, feeling the walls of my own home closing in. Morning came, gray and unforgiving. Liam and Sophia were already gone, on their way to the airport, leaving behind only the scent of her expensive perfume and the echo of their betrayal. I sat at the kitchen table, staring into a cold cup of coffee, feeling utterly, completely alone. I was a 68-year-old widow. My son had abandoned me, and his wife was plotting to have me declared incompetent. What could I possibly do? Then the phone rang. The shrill, old-fashioned ring of the landline cut through the heavy silence like a scream. I flinched. No one ever called this line anymore except for telemarketers. My first instinct was to ignore it, let it ring. But some flicker of an old habit made me get up and walk over to the wall-mounted phone. I picked up the receiver. Hello? A gruff, familiar voice, weathered by years of oil and engine smoke, came through the line. Helen? It's Marcus, from the shop, Arthur's friend. My heart skipped a beat. Marcus. He and Arthur had been inseparable, bonded by a shared love for classic cars. Marcus, I breathed. It's good to hear from you. Wish I could say the same, he grumbled. Listen, Helen, I'm not one for gossip, but a kid brought in a '67 Mustang yesterday, cherry red. Said his mother sold it to him. Your boy, Liam. I was silent. He didn't need an answer. Helen, you tell me that boy of yours didn't sell that car for a penny, less than $200,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $200,000. I sank into a nearby chair, the phone cord stretching taut. My mind reeled. Liam had sold it for a fraction of that, for a trip. Helen? Are you there? He did, Marcus, I whispered. He sold it for much, much less. There was a long pause on the other end, followed by a curse that was pure, unfiltered rage on my behalf. That woman, he finally said, his voice tight. This has her fingerprints all over it. He took a deep, steadying breath. Okay, listen to me. Arthur made me promise him something years ago. He made me swear on our friendship. He said, Marcus, if anything ever happens to me and that car ever leaves Helen's garage for good, you call her. Immediately. My own breath caught in my throat. He said to tell you about the clock, Marcus continued, his voice low and serious. He said you'd know what it meant. The clock. The strange new clock. This one is special, Helen. It keeps perfect time. Oh, Arthur, you magnificent man. You knew. You always knew. The fog of my grief and despair began to burn away, replaced by a cold, brilliant clarity. My son had a wife, but I had a husband. Where is it, Marcus? I asked, my voice no longer a whisper. It was steady. It was hard. Where's the car? It's here. At my shop, he said. I bought it from the kid. Paid him what Liam sold it for. I knew something was wrong. You need to come down here, Helen. Now. You need to see this for yourself. I didn't even hang up the phone. I grabbed my keys, walked out the door, and drove. Marcus's garage was a cathedral of steel and gasoline, a place Arthur had called his second home. And there she was, in the center of the shop, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Cherry. My heart ached just looking at her. Marcus met me at the door, his eyes full of a deep, sad understanding. He didn't say much. He just led me to the car. He opened the passenger door. "He and I spent a whole weekend rigging this," he said, pointing to the dashboard. "Said it was his insurance policy." He reached under the dash, pressed something I couldn't see, and the face of the new clock popped open on a tiny, silent hinge. Behind it was a small, hidden compartment. My hand was shaking as I reached inside. My fingers brushed against a thick manila folder. I pulled it out. It was heavy. It was full. It wasn't a collection of papers. It wasn't a history of her crimes. Inside the clock was my husband's final gift, a file, a weapon. I drove home from Marcus's garage, the heavy file sitting on the passenger seat like a silent, loyal passenger. The car was still at the shop, safe for now, but I had what I truly needed. Back in my kitchen, I laid everything out under the harsh light of the overhead lamp. The table where Sophia had patronized me with pastries just days before was now my war room. It was all there, just as Arthur had meticulously compiled it. Photographs of Sophia with other men, older, wealthy-looking men, at other weddings. Copies of marriage licenses from Arizona and Florida, under different last names but always the same first name, Sophia. Newspaper clippings from small towns, detailing cases of elder fraud, of families torn apart by a charming daughter-in-law who vanished with life savings, and his notes. Pages and pages of Arthur's steady, careful handwriting, documenting every suspicious question she'd ever asked, every subtle lie, every time she'd tried to isolate me from Liam. The grief I felt was sharp and profound, not for his death, but for his lonely battle. He had carried this burden alone to protect me. Tears were a luxury I could no longer afford. I picked up the phone. I started with the names in the file. The first man I called, Stanley. His voice was a ghost, tired and broken. He told me a story so chillingly familiar it could have been my own future. The concerned wife, the aging mother, the manufactured memory loss, the house sold for her safety, the money disappearing overnight. I thanked him. I promised him I would not let it happen again. My next call was to a number at the back of the file marked only with the initials PC. A man answered, his voice calm and professional. Coleman. "My name is Helen," I said. "My husband Arthur, I believe he spoke with you." There was a pause, and then a sigh of understanding. "Mrs. Bennett. I've been waiting for your call. Arthur was a good man. He told me he just needed irrefutable proof. I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry that it's come to this. I had my army. The 2 weeks they were in Italy felt like a lifetime. I used every moment. With the resources Arthur had secretly left me, I had Peter Coleman, the private investigator, dig deeper. He found the trail of debt she was running up in my son's name, the luxury lifestyle funded by credit cards Liam didn't even know he had. We built the case. We prepared the trap. All I had to do was wait for the predator to come home and make her final move. The call came 2 days after they returned. Sophia's voice was like honey laced with poison. "Helen, darling, we had the most wonderful time. And you know, while I was away, I was thinking about you. I found someone who can help, a wonderful consultant who specializes in making life easier for seniors. He's agreed to stop by tomorrow just for a chat." The game had begun. The next day, she arrived with him in tow, a man named Mr. Abernathy. He was slick, with a practiced smile and eyes that didn't smile with his mouth. Sophia was the picture of a devoted daughter-in-law, her hand always on my arm, her voice full of false concern. "Mom has been a little forgetful lately," she'd say to him, right in front of me. "We're worried she's lonely here in this big house." I played my part. I let my hands tremble slightly as I offered them tea. I made sure to miss the cup, spilling a few drops on the saucer. Sophia rushed over with a napkin, her face a perfect mask of loving care for Mr. Abernathy to see. He circled the living room like a shark. "Now, Helen," he began, his voice condescendingly gentle, "do you find managing all of this challenging sometimes? I pretended to think hard, my eyes distant. Sometimes I do get confused. Inside the pocket of my cardigan, my finger was already on the record button of my phone. Keep talking, I thought. Please, keep talking. She thought she was writing my ending. She had no idea I was directing hers. After an hour of intrusive questions about my finances, my health, my memory, they finally left. Sophia hugged me at the door, whispering how proud she was of me for being so open. I closed the door behind them, my smile dropping the second the lock clicked. I walked to the window, watched them get into his car, drive away. I pulled out my phone, stopped the recording. I saved the file. Then I called Peter. I got it, I said. An hour of it. He was just as you described. There was a brief silence on his end. Good, Peter said, his voice grim, because I just confirmed his real identity. She called him a care consultant. The state of Florida knows him as a professional con artist. The recording on my phone was a declaration of war. Peter Coleman, my PI, worked fast. Within a day, he had everything. Confirmation of the con artist's identity, access to the fraudulent credit card statements opened in Liam's name, and a copy of a fake passport Sophia had acquired under yet another alias. The trap was set. All that was left was to free the hostage, my son. I called him the next morning, the day Sophia was scheduled to leave for her business trip to Milan. My voice was calm. Liam, some important mail has arrived for you. I think you should see it before you take your mother-in-law to the airport. He arrived alone 20 minutes later, his face a mask of weary impatience. Mom, what is this? Sophia's waiting. I didn't answer. I just pointed to the kitchen table. I had laid it all out for him. Not the file Arthur had left me, not my accusations. Just cold, hard facts. A stack of credit card statements totaling over $30,000 of debt, all in his name, with purchases from stores he'd never entered. A detailed report from Peter on the so-called care consultant, and a high-resolution copy of a passport photo. It was Sophia's face, but the name on it was Eliza Vance. He stared at it all, his breath catching in his throat. He picked up the first statement. His hands were shaking. This is fake, he stammered, looking at me with desperation in his eyes. You faked this. You've never liked her. You're trying to ruin my life. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at him, with all the love and all the pain a mother could feel. Read the next page, Liam. He flipped through the statements, his denial crumbling with each purchase. A $5,000 handbag, a weekend at a spa I knew he couldn't afford. Then he saw the report on the con artist, the man he had welcomed into my home. He sank into a chair, his face ashen. I wasn't showing him proof of her crimes. I was showing him the anatomy of his own deception. It was a kindness, and it was a cruelty, all at once. She wouldn't, he whispered, his voice breaking. She loves me. Then listen to this, I said. I pressed play on my phone. The recording filled the silent kitchen. Sophia's voice, condescending and sweet, floated through the air, followed by the slick, predatory questions of the con artist. Liam heard her describe me as losing my mind. He heard her agree that selling the house quickly was for the best. He heard her laugh. That was the sound that finally broke him, the laugh. He dropped his head into his hands, and a sob tore through his body, a sound of such profound agony that it almost brought me to my knees. I went to him. I put my hand on his shoulder, my broken, beautiful boy. There was no joy in this, only a grim, necessary finality. The airport was bright, sterile, and loud. It was a world away from the quiet devastation in my kitchen. Peter stood with us, a silent, steady presence. Liam was a ghost beside me, pale and hollow-eyed. He hadn't spoken a word since he'd heard the recording. We stood behind a pillar, watching the security checkpoint. Then she appeared. Sophia strode through the terminal like she owned it. She wore a cream-colored trench coat, designer sunglasses, and an air of untouchable confidence. She pulled her expensive luggage, looking every bit the successful woman about to board a flight to Milan. She was a masterpiece of deception, right to the very end. She got in line. She checked her phone. She tapped her foot impatiently. 2 plainclothes detectives approached her. They were calm, professional. "Ma'am? A moment of your time." Sophia turned, her smile polite but annoyed. "I'm about to board a flight. Is there a problem, officers?" One of the detectives held up his badge. "We have a warrant for your arrest, Linda Marsh." The monster was real, and now it was gone. Her smile didn't just fade, it froze, then shattered. For a second, she looked like a cornered animal, her eyes darting left and right, calculating. Then the mask of sophistication dropped completely. She screamed. She kicked off her heels and ran. It was a short, desperate flight. Airport security tackled her before she made it 20 feet. She fought, thrashing and cursing on the polished floor as they clicked the handcuffs around her wrists. As they pulled her to her feet, her wild eyes scanned the crowd of onlookers, and then she saw us. She saw Liam, his face a canvas of shame and horror, and she saw me. She went completely still, all the fight drained out of her, replaced by a look of pure, venomous hatred aimed directly at me. It was finally over. As the police led her away, she was still screaming. The officers read her rights, their calm voices a stark contrast to her feral rage. I heard one of them speak her name again, the real one, the one Arthur had found. At the airport, the police called her real name, and it wasn't Sophia. The drive home from the airport was silent. There were no words for what we had just witnessed, for the life that had been unmade right before our eyes. The months that followed were quiet, too. Sophia, or rather Linda Marsh, took a plea deal. 12 years. Liam came home with 1 suitcase and a silence that was different now, not guilty but broken. We didn't talk about what happened, we just existed, sharing the quiet spaces between the pain. Then one Saturday morning, I heard it. A deep, familiar rumble that shook the coffee in my cup. I looked out the kitchen window. Marcus was in the driveway, a gentle smile on his face, stepping out of a gleaming cherry-red Mustang. He was bringing her home. The garage wasn't empty anymore. I found Liam in there later that week. He was holding Arthur's old restoration journal, the small leather-bound book open in his hands. His fingers were tracing the careful, steady handwriting of his father. He looked up at me, and for the first time in years, his eyes were clear. He picked up a soft cloth. He opened the hood. He began to care for her. Justice had been served. But this was healing. I walked over and quietly got into the driver's seat. The worn leather felt like an old friend welcoming me home. Liam sat beside me in the passenger seat, the silence between us no longer an enemy, but a space for understanding. I put my hand on the steering wheel, right where Arthur's used to be. Liam put his hand next to mine. I covered his hand with my own. Some legacies are meant to be rebuilt. Thank you so much for being here and listening to this part of my life. Every family has a story of its own, and if you feel comfortable sharing, I would be truly honored to read yours in the comments below. Please subscribe to be part of our community, and we'll see you in the next story.